Good, so we can start. I'm going to start in French first. Donc, bonsoir à tous, bonjour à tous. Donc, ceci est le premier épisode de l'équipe Tresortech. Donc, nous avons décidé depuis un bon moment de faire pas mal d'actions et parmi toutes les actions que nous souhaitons mettre en place, donc, il y avait donc cette idée de mettre en place un podcast qui peut se faire soit en vidéo, soit en audio. Et donc aujourd'hui, c'est le premier épisode de ce podcast. Et quoi de mieux que commencer cette initiative avec un des projets qu'on a démarré depuis l'année dernière. Mais avant de commencer, je ne suis pas tout seul, donc je suis avec Mathieu. Donc Mathieu, est-ce que tu peux faire un signe de la main, te présenter rapidement, dire comment tu vas, comment tu te sens?
Bonjour Lucaleb, alors moi je m'appelle Mathieu, oui je me sens bien, j'ai passé une bonne semaine et je me présente, donc je suis le responsable de Tresortech et donc on va faire ce podcast pour vous présenter les différentes activités qu'on peut avoir et en tout cas il y a des belles choses qui vont se mettre en place.
Exactement. Et donc, en parlant de belles choses, donc nous avons donc mis en place depuis l'année dernière ce projet qui consistait en la traduction en fait d'un ouvrage dont on va parler tout à l'heure. Et donc, l'ensemble de cet épisode va se faire en anglais. So, switching to English. We have our guest today. So this is he's basically the one who inspires us to collaborate on this special partnership. I remember the first time I read his book. It was really breathtaking, and I thought that would be really important to share this knowledge not only to the church in the world, especially in French-speaking community, because we are constituted in some kind of a congregation where people tends to learn by process, and we thought the book we are currently working on, which is a Great Son Church, can be a great addition to this collaboration, this contribution to the society. So the genius, the innovator of this project is of course James. So James, can you introduce yourself, a couple of words, who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for the introduction and thanks for having me on. It's been great working with you guys. I think we first were in touch with each other maybe 2 years ago, trying to get this project started and off the ground. And it's been a long time in the making, but it's gone really well. And I'm really excited to announce that we're going to be having a revision to the Great Church Sound app. So the Church Sound Guide mobile app, that's a free app, will have French translations as well as Spanish later this year. So those translations are actually being coded by the app developer, a friend of mine, and we're going to get those in and test it out here soon. And we're also working on a translation for the book, Great Church Sound, and trying to get that going. But yeah, a little bit about my background. I've been involved in the live sound space for a long time, at least 25, almost 30 years now. And started out as a musician, playing drums, and needed to help the band get the sound system going, and one thing led to another, and I started running sound more often than I was playing music, it seemed. And then eventually I needed a day job, so I got involved installing sound systems as well as designing, project managing, selling them, all that kind of stuff. So I've been in the commercial sound and video integration space for pretty much my whole career, the last 20 some years. And during that time, I really understood that the church had a need that wasn't being met. And I was a volunteer tech at church, and then I became a technical director, and I was tasked with training new volunteers to run the sound system. And I just realized there was a lot of training material that just wasn't available for those types of people. And I was a professional in the field. I was a professional doing sound, installing sound, teaching people sound, But in the church setting, it's very different than in the club or the concert or the touring world. And so we need different training resources. So one of my missions was to create training resources for church sound volunteers and team leaders to be able to use good training material to train their teams. So that's where Great Church Sound really came from several years ago. It took me a long time to finally get motivated enough to write the book and find the time for it, but I think the first edition of the book was released in 2015, and now we have the second edition that was released in late 2019, I think. So that's the book, the second edition that will be translated, that you guys are working on right now, and it's really exciting.
Yeah. Thank you. One of the main questions I would like to ask is, what are, for your personal experience, the perception of what we call now the technical ministry, the media ministry, from the church you have encountered? What is the perception of this not so new, not so old, also aspect of the church perception in the church you have encountered so far?
Yeah, there's kind of two different ways that people see that, and it depends on the leadership of the church. That starts with the pastor, the main head pastor maybe, and then also the worship pastor. Both of those entities have a role in how the tech team or media team is perceived. And in the churches that I've done the most work in, most of the time the tech team and the media team is considered part of the worship team. So they meet with the worship leader, worship pastor, and the musicians and the singers, vocalists, and everybody is part of that same team, which they really should be. There's different levels of that some teams have found that work for them. Sometimes the tech team is really involved in every worship team meeting. Sometimes there's kind of the technical worship ministry and the more music-oriented ministry, and those can break into separate teams. Most of what I see with that is when you have very large technical production involvement, so video, lighting, sound, all of that kind of stuff, or even broadcast and now live streaming video. So oftentimes if you have churches that have more technical systems, those tech team members will be more grouped together. Now the other part of that is that some churches actually don't always consider the sound team as part of the worship team or the ministry in that respect. They're kind of siloed off or put into their own category. And that's, I think, maybe a dysfunctional way to look at the tech team, because the tech team is really responsible for helping convey everything that gets broadcast and reinforced within the church and beyond. And so they really are a worship ministry team member, and they have their own purpose in helping relay the word. So I think it's important that we look at the tech team as part of the worship team in most cases.
Yeah, of course. So 2 years ago, we went from a normal society to, let's say, a pandemic society, okay? And most of the societies, the companies, the world, even the church have been affected by it. And this phenomenon kind of enhance church leaders, pastors, worship leaders to engage more resources in technology. So can we say that in a way, when the technical ministry, the media ministry wasn't considered at the time, with this crisis coming on, there's more, let's say, light, there's more eyes on this ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, I mean, we need the tech people to even help pull off some of these services and worship events online. I mean, technology is baked into that process, right? It's super important. But not only that, the quality is much more transparent when you're live streaming or recording for playback later. When you're live in a room, the quality, it's instantaneous. It comes and goes, and if there's a bad note or the mix isn't perfect, you don't really notice it as much in the room at the time, unless you're really listening for it. But when something is recorded or when something is streamed live, and especially if you're listening through headphones, you pick out everything. You can hear the poor quality of mixing, or you can hear one instrument or vocal being too loud or maybe not tuned in properly.
Yes.
So the tech team ends up having a harder job in a lot of ways because they're required to produce higher quality, and if they don't, everybody knows about it. And that's the challenge with live streaming and recorded.
Yeah. So I think you wrote the second edition of Great Church Songs, sorry, I think. Yeah, this is the second edition. The first one was in the blue cover, I guess, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's a smaller book. I think both of them have kind of orange coloring, but the first one was a little bit smaller, and in the second edition, I added some stuff for digital consoles and live streaming and a few extra specifics that churches are more and more getting into.
Yeah. So we all know the backstory of what motivates you to bring this book into light. What do you think about this book will bring to other congregations? We just spoke about this partnership we engaged in 2 years ago on translating basically the book into French version, into Spanish version. What do you think for you can be the outcomes of bringing this book into this community?
I really want it to be more accessible to people. I think it's great that we have all this information available, but if people can't understand it or apply it to their local congregation, their local church, then it's not really helping everyone the way that it could. And obviously the way we teach information is an important part of that, but obviously the language we used is super important, obviously, for understanding in our local context. So language in terms of, translation, French, English, Spanish, whatever, but also the way we describe technical stuff. As geeks, we're the three of us are kind of sound and video geeks, right? We tend to use high kind of language. We use higher jargon and words that don't necessarily mean what we think they do to other people. And so we kind of have to bring that down to the everyday person, which is a good thing. That should not be a challenge. Most of the time I see people in the tech circles use all of that language basically as kind of an ego or hey, look what I know type of thing. And I don't think that helps in the church environment at all. And so I've tried to really, in the app and the book, steer clear of using that type of jargon a lot. And if I do have to use some of that, I will define those words appropriately and try to get down to the really pure concepts of what's important. So I hope that in the translation process, we can maintain those concepts and that practical level of instruction.
Yeah, it is true, because I think in the French society, one of the main drawbacks we had is to read book in English. Perhaps based on the foundation we had in society, we speak in French, we read in French. Most of the country we've been speaking in French, and I know from experience, and once I introduced the book to my fellow volunteer in my church, they had so many difficulties to read the book because most of them do not have an experience in the English language. And one thing also that was really interesting was the app, because I think the app was more compact and more, let's say, friendly from the user perspective. So they had the chance to experience some kind of the whole package from the book in the app, but now that they need to evolve in their game on the technical business. So do you have like contacts from the Spanish community? Is there any people helping you on translating the book in Spanish? I know there's a strong Spanish community, Latin community in America, but do you have like maybe people from South America or maybe in Europe, especially from the Iberic part?
Yeah, so I have someone that is a native Spanish speaker from Latin America that is doing the primary translation. And once I get that created, I'm going to go ahead and release that for kind of peer review or beta testing. And we'll go ahead and make sure we have, plenty of input from multiple countries in Latin America, because there's different dialects, just like there are in French-speaking countries, different dialects for that sort of thing. So that does go through quite a process to ensure that everything matches up for as many speakers and readers as possible.
Yes. So when can we expect the app version, the French version, the Spanish version to be released?
Yeah, I'm hoping for the app to be released with the updated Spanish and French translations at the same time, and that should be happening, I think, in July. Possibly August at the latest, but it is currently going through our technical development process, and soon will be available for initial testing, just to make sure we can select the language setting when the app loads, and then we'll release that for full public release. And then the book, I'm not quite sure yet. The book takes a little bit longer to do the formatting on, because it has to go to be printed and also for digital formats. And so I'm hoping to get translations for both of those back sometime later this summer. And I'd like to release that before the end of the year, so that both the app and the book can be current for the different user groups.
Do you have other projects aside the translation of the book, the translation of the app, maybe the third edition of Tresorstech, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. In fact, I have been thinking about the third edition, and I might make some slight changes to the second edition, especially with the addition of these translations, and we may put out a third edition or a minor tweak to the second edition, maybe a 2.5. And so I have thought about that. I'm not quite sure what all I would add to it. It's already getting fairly good sized as it is, fairly thick. I want it to be approachable without being overwhelming. I want to keep it current. At the same time, one of my goals with the book and the app is to keep it as accessible and generalized as possible, because there's a lot of different sound systems out there. There's a lot of different sizes of congregations and types of equipment, and I try not to focus on the brands of equipment or the specific type of console or loudspeaker, because that's really, that's important for each individual sound system, but it doesn't change the way we approach a mix. It doesn't change the way we navigate and technically deliver our sound. There's nuances depending on the brand of equipment you use. So because of that, I don't really have to update the book quite as often, because I'm not mentioning certain types of equipment or brands that go out of date or out of style. I think that you bring up a really good point there, and it's that interactive nature of things. And it most of the time before the last couple of years, what we've thought about in terms of sharing what we've got, sharing worship online or in recording, it was always a one-to-many approach. It was always, we do this, we package it, and we give it to you, right? Broadcast or TV style or radio style. But what has become more important is actually engaging the congregation that is online, especially if it's live. But this can also be done with recorded material through different social media channels, using commenting or chat and things like that. You could effectively broadcast something live or play back something that was recorded, but do it live and still have the engaging chat happening at the same time. And being able to incorporate those users into a live setting where people in a local congregation are aware of and can somehow interact with people on the online virtual side is a really important thing. And there's been different companies that have tried to address this specifically for the church space. And there are technical nuances and sometimes complications to pull that off effectively. You mentioned one of the best ways to help bring people into the worship environment, and that is using ambient microphones and helping fill that gap from maybe what would be considered a sterile or very clean mix environment from the stage, and adding in more of that background noise or sound into the mix and create a more enveloping or more complete audio soundscape of what's happening in the room. And that actually goes a long way to helping you and I as viewers tune into that worship environment. And so, I agree with you. I think more emphasis could be put on that.
Yeah, sure. So one last question. What do you want to bring into the kingdom? What is your angle if you want to leave some kind of legacy into this world? What will be this contribution you want to bring into the kingdom of God?
I think it really comes down to making things accessible to people that even though we're involved in our ministries in a high-tech capacity, that should always be in service of being a transparent conduit, a transparent pathway of the Word of God to reach us as the congregation, the congregation at large, whether that's in the church locally, whether that's online as a virtual congregation, whatever that happens to be. And really what I want to, my mission is to help that happen as smoothly as possible and help everyday people, the lay people in the church and volunteers perform that service to the best of their ability. We don't have to get it perfect. We never get it perfect. I have never made a perfect mix. But I want to help empower others to serve their church in the best way that they can with that. And that's what my mission is.
Well said. And that will be the end of our episode. Like we said, that we won't want to keep it really long, maybe like 15 to 30 minutes maximum. But thank you, James, for taking the time. I know this is like 11, 12 at your place. So thank you for taking the time to speak about the project, speak about the partnership, and also share some knowledge on your perception from the technical aspect, especially for the church. And this will be our last word. So merci beaucoup pour ceux qui nous ont écoutés ce soir, dépendant de là où vous êtes, ou ce matin, dépendant de là où vous êtes. Comme on vous disait, c'est vraiment le premier épisode de pilote, donc soyez vraiment indulgents par rapport à tout ce qui va ressortir. Et nous aurons l'occasion, bien sûr, au fur et à mesure, de vous partager d'autres expériences de la part d'autres personnes inspirantes qui sont vraiment des personnes qui ont été appelées par le royaume vraiment pour contribuer justement à l'Église avec grand E, notamment par des aspects pratiques tels que la technique ou encore d'autres aspects. Donc Mathieu, tu veux dire le mot de la fin peut-être?
Merci à tous de nous avoir écoutés. En tout cas, merci pour cette expérience que tu nous as partagée et aussi des différents aspects d'évolution qu'il peut y avoir que tu nous as permis de collaborer ensemble pour traduire cette application et traduire aussi ce livre. En tout cas, je vous le recommande vivement d'aller faire un tour sur l'application quand elle sera disponible et aussi le livre arrivera dès la fin de l'année et on vous tiendra au courant.
Donc merci beaucoup et à très prochainement à tous.